I declare the council members' briefing session open at 6 p.m. Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting today is being held on Wajak Noongar Budja, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I thank all past and present members of the community that have supported the city to better understand and value Noongar culture within the city of Wanneroo. I invite you to bow your head in prayer. Lord, we thank you for blessing our city, our community and our council. Guide us all in our decision-making to act fairly, without fear or favour, with compassion, integrity, wisdom and honesty. May we show true leadership, be inclusive of all and guide all of the city's people and many families to a prosperous future that all may share. We ask this in your name. Amen. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. The broadcast of proceedings of the meeting can be accessed live and on demand through the City of Wanneroo YouTube channel. Attendances are as per the record, and apologies and leave of absence. We have one apology tonight, which is Councillor Coetzee. I don't think we have a single deputation tonight, so we might skip that section. Reports. Declarations of interest by council members, including the nature and extent of which the interests are to be made at the commencement of the item to which the interest relates. Declarations of interest forms are to be completed and handed to the Chief Executive Officer. And we're starting with planning and sustainability. Does any of the councillors have a declaration of interest? Councillor Figg.
With regard to item 4.1, I disclose that due to submitting a comment during the consultation period on behalf of a local community group, as a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Thank you, Councillor Figg. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My declaration is on the same item, 4.1, the Two Rocks Town Centre Precinct C, D and E. With regard to this item 4.1, I disclose that I'm the Commodore of the Sun City Yacht Club, and as a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly.
And I declare an interest on item 4.1 as well, as I am a social member of I think I'm still a social member of the Yacht Club. And so, if not, I have been previously, and I disclose that because of this interest, that might create a perception of a conflict of interest, and as a consequence there may be an perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected, and I declare that I'll consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll also, just out of caution, declare an impartiality statement to item 4.1. I disclose that I'm the chairperson of the Explore Yanchep Two Rocks Tourism Network Group, which operates within the Two Rocks Town Centre area. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I'll consider this matter and vote on its merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you. Any other impartiality notes? Okay. Mr. Bowring.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 4 items on tonight's agenda from Planning and Sustainability. I will introduce item 4.1 and Mr Van Heinigen will introduce item 4.2, and I'll be happy to take questions on items 4.3 and 4.4. So items 4.3 and 4.4 being our ongoing normalisation process for our older structure planned areas and their translation into district planning scheme number 2. Item 4.1 is tonight presented to Council for consideration of a local development plan for the Two Rocks Town Centre. The need for an LDP arises from both agreed structure plan number 70, Two Rocks Town Centre, and the conditions of subdivision approval granted by the West Australian Planning Commission. Ordinarily, local development plans would be dealt with under delegation, as these days LDPs deal with a very constrained set of matters that are set out in the planning regulations and the terms of the WAPC subdivision approval. This matter has been brought to Council specifically in acknowledgement of the concerns expressed by members of the community in relation to development that is now occurring within the structure plan area, namely the development of a neighbourhood shopping centre adjacent to the King Neptune statue. The area subject of this LDP is primarily part of Precinct E under ASP 70 and is the southernmost portion of the town centre. This area is primarily single residential in nature with two-storey housing permitted. The LDP itself cannot change the road layout or the levels and the like, which has been approved through the WAPC's subdivision approval. Under the planning regulations, LDPs are a means by which a coordinated set of variations can be pre-approved for a specific area in order to avoid the need for applicants to obtain development approval for those matters. ASP 70, for its part, envisaged a much broader range of matters to be addressed within the LDPs for the town centre. ASP 70 was, however, prepared over 10 years ago and predates the current planning regulations. The regulations now override provisions within any structure plan. Thus, the extent to which this LDP needs to address ASP 70 has been significantly reduced. And there has also been significant amendments to the R codes over time since ASP 70 was adopted, further reducing the need for provisions within the LDP. The LDP was advertised for public comment and 64 submissions were received. These submissions have been summarised in attachment 3. And while there were a significant number of submissions, many of the matters raised related to subdivision design and associated engineering works, which are not subject of the DAP itself, or the LDP itself, sorry. Administration's recommendation to approve the LDP with a range of modifications is at the end of the report. As detailed in the report, these modifications remove duplication of council policy and R code provisions. This leaves the LDP dealing with the following range of matters: allowing double garages on some narrow lots, the provision of verandas in the front setback area, the interface of lots directly abutting public open space sites, and dwelling orientation. So that's the limited set of matters that the LDP now addresses, and I'd be happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just noticed one part on page 7. In statutory compliance, it is recommended that the local development plan be approved without modifications, which I believe is contrary to the conclusion that administration's made.
Thank you. Yes, I had spotted the error in the drafting. Thanks for that.
Right.
That needs to be corrected. Yep.
Councillor Figg, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. So I am wondering what sort of physical constraints there might be put onto the left-out only intersection onto Lisford Avenue.
Mr Bowring?
Yeah, so at this stage we've got the LDP which is reflecting what's in the engineering design details as part of the subdivision. So the controls and the detailed design is still in the process of being worked through. So at this stage it will be a left out only for heading north along Lisford as you are heading east onto Lisford Ave. But that will allow for pedestrian access through from the east to the coast, view corridors and the like.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Do you have another question, Councillor Figg?
I do, thank you, Mayor. Parking issues within the Marina precinct have a knock-on effect to Jordan Street, which abuts this development. I'm wondering, seeing as though Jordan Street is often used as overflow parking for boats and boat trailers should the marina parking be full, is there any provision for parking along Jordan Street?
Thank you, Mr Bowring.
I will take that on notice and see if I can access any up-to-date detailed designs for that, but it's not part of the detail in the report at the moment.
Councillor Figg, do you have another question? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My questions relate to, look, the report is very comprehensive. I think administration have tried to cover off on literally everything in the report, which is really great. Just going back to the Australis Drive and the interfacing with Lisford Avenue, Looking at the plan that's been provided in the report with regard to that, you sort of got a boulevard-style road. You've got sort of an east and a west through Australis Drive to Lisford, with obviously some sort of central garden or water catchment area. I'm just concerned, going back to what Councillor Figg was stating, that when we have 300 to 400 trailer boats coming in on a normal Saturday or Friday night, coming and going, they're obviously going to use that way as opposed to the current Jordan linkage. I'm just concerned that that road width and size is not going to be able to cater for trailerised boats. Have you taken that into consideration?
Mr Bowring.
Thank you for the question. The road design will meet and be designed to meet Australian standards and relevant city standards as well. But the specific question about boat trailers, I can seek some further clarification and provide that to councillors on notice, if you like. That I'm not sure that there's anything specific that's been done to address boat trailers, but I can't rule that out because I'm not aware of that issue having come up.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. If you can do an add-on to that as well, with the development going in, obviously with all the new building going in, there's going to be extra traffic in that localised area. Does this possibly mean then that people that need to park their boat trailers and cars, because they are attached, may end up using the council library area as well? So I'm just, when you look at the study, if you've got one already created by administration or somebody else, can you have a look at how or where all those vehicles and are going? Because Jordan, not Councillor Wright, but Jordan Street is quite congested and does get dangerous at times for people trying to even walk along that street because there's no footpath as yet.
Mr Bowring.
We can certainly have a look at the longer-term issue. It's a broader issue, obviously, to the LDP itself, but certainly can work with, talk to our traffic services team with Director of Assets and see if we can find out if there's any sort of modelling of that issue that's been done already as part of the structure plan.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Councillor Miles, you have another question?
Yeah, just to wrap it up on that, I understand looking at on the map, page 52, we're only focusing on a very narrow area, but when we're looking at the whole precinct, including the marina as well, that probably should have been incorporated in the design so we can see what is happening as a whole rather than a very small area. And it probably should have included Charnwood Park as well, because sometimes there's quite big events on there. So I would prefer if administration could look at the wider area and not just focus on this very small part, which is being done by the Finney Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr Bowring.
Take that as a comment on the in relation to the future LDPs and the other areas that are still subject to LDPs to be prepared, and we'll look at how that's presented.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Are there any other questions on this topic item? Yes, Councillor Nguyen.
Just in relation to the King Neptune, that is, it seems to be part of the precinct D, and King Neptune is part of the State Heritage Register. What steps is the developer taking to ensure that development won't be affecting that particular area that's protected?
Thank you.
Mr Bowring.
Yes, so at the moment the site of the King Neptune statue is on a separate Crown title that is still under the management of the developer. At this stage, RAFA have control of the site. It hasn't yet been developed as public open space to be handed over to the city. There's a range of bonds that the city holds in order to manage that. And the final outcome of that. So at this stage, RAF is still looking at its long-term objectives for the site, and the delivery of that is subject to legal agreement with the city and deeds.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to come back on what Councillor Nguyen has just asked, and we know that there's a $400,000 bond being put in place for that public open space to be established. Can you report back on, I guess, why the city hasn't initiated that build in that public open space area, or when that is going to happen? Because I have been asked by people, why are we still waiting? It's just all fenced off at the moment. So can we get a clear indication? The money's there, clearly. We asked for it to be put up. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr Bowring, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. It is a bond, so it's not actually for the city specifically to use at its discretion. The developer still hasn't delivered that, but I can provide an update perhaps as to when they are considering and what they're actually, where they're at with that consideration. Provide that back to council.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions, we'll move to the next item. Thank you, Mr Van Hanegem.
Thank you, Mayor. So the purpose of this item is to facilitate Council's final adoption of the reviewed local planning policy for East Wanneroo. So the policy outlines the city's approach to the planning and development of the area and supplements the district structure plan that was prepared by the state government. The aim of the policy is to ensure that the area develops with a distinct sense of place and that planning process is managed appropriately. The draft policy was advertised for 42 days and 12 submissions have been received. The submissions and administration's response to these are summarised in attachment 4 of the report. The submissions relate to 4 key areas. The first one is the tree species that will be permissible in the area. Second one is the requirement in the policy for wider road reserves to facilitate more trees. The third is the issue of when local structure plans will be accepted by the city. And then the last one is the requirement for local level development contribution plans. So in terms of, you'll see that attachment 2 on page 85 includes a track change version of the policy showing administration's proposed changes. In terms of these proposed changes, administration supports the inclusion of additional tree species that will be appropriate in the area. So we're taking on that, the suggestion from the submission to do that. We also recommend that the requirement for wider road reserves be retained. So we're not proposing a change in that. That's fundamental to make sure that we have space for trees. That's crucial to achieve a strong sense of place in the area and also to improve the livability of the area. The advertised version of the policy states that local structure plans could only be accepted by the city once a district level development contribution plan is significantly progressed. Some of the submissions requested that the city accept structure plans prior to the progression of this district level DCP or developer contribution plan. In response to these submissions, we now recommend that structure plans be accepted by the city as we believe that this will facilitate the timely delivery of housing in the area. And then lastly, in terms of the requirement for local level DCPs to be submitted alongside local structure plans, administration recommends that this requirement be retained as well. If this is not possible, administration now recommends that local structure plans could be accepted on condition that there's sufficient certainty about contributions at the time of subdivision. So we facilitate the development process and assist developers so that as long as when we get to the subdivision stage, which is the crucial development stage, that we then have the information in terms of contributions. This is crucial to ensure that contributions are fair and equitable and that future developers or the city are not burdened by future shortfalls created by earlier developers not making contributions. So that's important, but we are, just for your information as well, we have accepted 1 structure plan and we are anticipating 2 more structure plans by the end of this year. Thank you, Mayor, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Van Hanegem. Do I have any questions on this thing? Oh, Councillor Huntley.
Yeah, declaration, Madam Mayor. So obviously, when making a declaration, with regard to item 4.2, I believe this is, yes, 4.2, I disclose that I am a resident within Precinct 6 of the East Wanneroo subdivision, and as a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on this matter may be affected. As the policy is in general in nature and the precincts aren't allocated plus local DPCs, and it's about road widths and laneways and trees, I do think that I declare that I will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. I don't believe I have any financial implication at the present time.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple of questions with relation to the comments that we received from obviously some of the developers or planners on behalf of developers. So some people obviously objected to some of the tree species that we deal with. Do we not have a separate policy on what council plants as far as tree species? Do we have to specifically say in this item what a tree species has to be planted? Don't we have another street tree policy that we can refer to rather than try and have a different policy for this one and that one?
Mr Van Hannigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor. Our land development service unit, they have a list of trees that they approve for developments. In terms of, because this is a key consideration for East Wanneroo area, we've looked at all the different trees that would be appropriate to this area, and we've added some of the trees based on the submissions and the suggestions we received. So for the first time, we're including this actually in the policy because it is so important for this area and the sense of place. So you'll see in attachment Appendix 3 of page 141, Appendix 3 of the policy, we've included those species that will be permitted in this area. If there are other species, we can still consider that, but this space, you'll see from that appendix that it lists in which locations it would be the most appropriate. For instance, in laneways, for instance, we use smaller plants that will fit into the narrower spaces, and then in different, like public open space, different types of trees and that. But to answer your question, this is the first time that we've included it in the policy, but it is because of the importance of trees for this area.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, I understand, Mr Van Hannigan, but the question I guess I have is if council wishes to change or add species of trees to our policy, does that mean then we have to go through this process of putting it out for advertising and all that? Can we just amend it if we amend our other policy? So I'm just trying to make it easy for council that may in 6 months' time find a new species of tree that it wants to start planting. We would then have to put it in here, but we'd then have to go through an advertising process. Is that correct?
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor, this is quite an exhaustive list of tree species. So these are the ones where, from our experience in other areas where we've got experience that these ones are appropriate and we know what the advantages and disadvantages of different species are. So we believe that we're confident that this list will be able to cater for the redevelopment of that area. But if there are, I suppose technically speaking, the policy to add species, that the policy needs to be amended. It doesn't necessarily have to be advertised. Also, if there's proposals for council, don't have to, when you make a consideration in terms of the policy, you can depart from your own policy. You're not required to actually follow the policy.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan.
If there are other species, maybe I could just add, Mayor, if there are other species that you're aware of that you would like us to consider, we're happy to consider that and we can include that before next week.
Thank you, Ms Van Hannigan. Any other questions? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. So just going off that comment, if there was a particular species that needed to be removed from the policy, rather than going through all the hurdles, would that be allowed for the next ordinary council meeting?
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor, if there are species that you want to remove, I suppose we could consider that for next week, or you could make an amendment next week when you consider the item.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Any other questions? Councillor Nguyen.
Just off that, what's your view on jacaranda? It seems to be quite popular with a few people.
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor, I mean, I'm not a tree expert, as you know, but for the purpose of this area and the urbanisation of this area, it's about this sense of place in the first instance. So when you drive around in East Wanneroo, you need to be able to know that you are actually in East Wanneroo versus any other area that we have. Council expresses strong interest for different areas to be developed in different ways so that it's more recognisable. So jacaranda trees can, in fact, play that role. Also, obviously, trees contribute toward climate change and addressing climate change, and that's important as part of our urban forest strategy that we increase the tree canopy in the city, and again, jacaranda trees could contribute to that area. So, but in terms of actual the management of it, I'm not sure on a day-to-day basis, but yeah, happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Mr Singh, would you like to respond to that question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My understanding is that jacarandas are more suitable for public open spaces rather than road reserves. The issue with them is the roots are quite invasive and that can damage infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question about the types of trees that we're going to be using. And so looking at the tree list that we have now, are these for the road verges? Because obviously we've got the Carnaby flight path right across East Wanneroo, but I only see two types of Banksia trees in here, one coastal and one firewood, and I don't see many grevilleas. But so is this not the parkland? But a parkland's going to be able to plant a lot more bird food style trees.
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor. So as I mentioned, this list is, we've considered this, our land development section, this is the type of trees that they recommend. They consider the habitat for birds, for instance, as part of that consideration. But if I can refer you to the actual attachment, so page 141, if you look at that attachment to the policy, which was Appendix 3, you'll see that there's the specific locations listed there. So it goes through the list, it lists all the different trees, and then it marks where those specific trees would be appropriate. For instance, certain trees may be invasive to be planted next to roads, and then that would be indicated on there that it's more appropriate for a public open space. Or others would be listed as, you know, for instance, in a lane where you can only have certain types because of the limited space in that. So I could just refer you to that appendix. It outlines all of that, and that's based on our experience as administration in terms of the trees.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Councillor Huntley.
Yeah, just a supplementary. With the Carnabys, we obviously don't want Carnabys anywhere near the road verges. So we need to make sure Banksias and various other food source trees are not on road verges. But where the parks are concerned, that's where we can actually go hell for leather and get the chewits up there and everything. They will be root invasive, but they're in parkland, that's fine. But it doesn't sort of clearly state where each tree is allowed to go. And so I'm just a little bit worried that we could find Banksias on busy main roads, which is not what we want, because these birds are so slow to take off. We're just going to have roadkill. So have we consulted with the university? I know Murdoch are doing a program.
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we did consult with Murdoch because they have that project, ongoing project in the area about the birds. But again, we have experience of which trees would be appropriate and also consider the impact on wildlife. So we have considered that as part of this. But again, if you have any suggestions on this that could be considered.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to go on to the subject that I brought up extensively last time with Mr Dixon, the road reserves, and it has been commented by some of the planners and developers because we want to have some of the roads a lot wider than we've done previously. And they brought it up, and you put it in your report that it sort of goes against the livable neighbourhoods policy that we currently abide by. One of the questions I have, if we talk about the trees, we want more road reserve for tree species to cool the roads down, but if we're going to have wider roads, it's sort of a little bit more of an issue. Sort of, I would have thought that the smaller roads with the trees on the sides would have a better coverage of possibly two and single lane roads than wider roads. So what is the planning department's view on that by having those certain roads considerably wider, as we discussed last time?
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. So what we are recommending is that the road reserves be broadened for some of these. So for the higher order roads, I can refer you to page 183. That's a list of the different roads. In the green are all the roads where we don't propose any changes in the road width. The blue is where we are proposing a larger road reserve. But to answer your question, we're not recommending that the actual pavement be expanded, but only that the road reserve be made wider in order to facilitate more trees. And in terms of particularly to make sure that pathways and cycleways are fully covered by trees eventually in terms of shade. So it actually, I think there's been some confusion with some of the submissions that they thought that we are proposing wider roads, but it is wider road reserves.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just the other one that touches on this one, again, another one that I've brought up previously, and that's the local structure plans, and it's on your page 73. The submissions are obviously they're suggesting that it's inconsistent with state planning policy 3.6 because we're sort of saying that we're going to hold their application until we get a DCP in place. Now, administration has said that they won't stop anybody from lodging an application, and I appreciate that. But how then is administration going to do the final tick-off if we haven't approved the DCP or advertised the DCP? So it could be an effect that we may slow the progress down by having this in the policy.
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor. So the version that we advertised stated that we, as I mentioned in my presentation, was that we wouldn't accept any local structure plans until the district level DCP has been finalised. But now we're recommending that we change that and that we accept local structure plans, notwithstanding the fact that the district level DCP is still being prepared. In terms of the fact that we're accepting it means that it goes into the planning system and the planning process will then be followed. So we will do an assessment, we'll do a recommendation, council will consider it, and we will make a recommendation to the WAPC who makes the decision on the local structure plans. So the fact that we accept it essentially means that the process will follow as usual. The only difference that we are, I suppose the one condition that we've included that at the end of the process, as I mentioned, if there's applications for subdivision at that stage, which could be 6 months or a year after the local structure plans have been approved, then we need to have certainty about the contributions when we actually deal with the actual application of subdivision or development applications. I can just refer you to page 91, section 7 outlines essentially the change that we would accept local structure plans and that the DCP doesn't essentially have to be finished to facilitate that. And also in terms of the page, sorry, my eyes, I'm getting old. 88, there's also in terms of local structure plans, 0.3.1, we've changed that to reflect what I've just told you. And then, of course, we can also have agreements with developers earlier in the process. But it is important that we make sure that there's equitable payments by early developers versus people that develop later in the process.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Do you have another question, do you, Councillor Miles?
Yes, thank you. Just on the development contribution plans, and obviously we are somewhat beholden to the Planning Commission because we haven't yet received it from them to even assess it unless our planning department has. I know council hasn't seen it. My concern is you said at the beginning or at the outset there's already been several of the precincts have already lodged with the Commission, and we're obviously assessing those at the same time as all the agencies are. I'm trying to hopefully get to a point where the alignment of the approval will be for the approval of the DCP when it finally happens, because I'm assuming that's going to be quite an extensive process to receive, document through here. I believe it would go out for consultation for whatever time, and then it would come back to us, then it goes to the Commission for approval. That sounds like a 12 to 18 month process. Is that going to align with what people are lodging today?
Mr Van Hannigan, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. So maybe just to give you an update on the district level DCP. So the district level DCP is prepared by the state government, and that lists all the district level facilities that will be provided, like main roads and district level community facilities. The state government is preparing that. Initially, they were anticipating that they would submit this DCP to the city in September. They delayed with that, so they're still working on that. So it looks like, realistically speaking, we probably would only get that by the end of this year. What the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage has advised is that they are splitting the district level DCP into two parts. So part one will cover all the facilities except like all the different items of the DCP. But then the part two will deal with the stormwater management, because the stormwater management is essentially the issue that is delaying this process. So when we get this DCP, they will hand it over to the city, and the city needs to initiate an amendment to our local district planning scheme to include the DCP into our planning scheme. And that process will be, council will consider that amendment, and that will then be submitted to the Department of WIPC and to the Minister for a decision. That process, I believe, will be expedited by the state government, but council obviously needs to consider whether it's acceptable to council. But that's one of the reasons, because of this delay, it's one of the reasons when we wrote this policy initially, we were anticipating that by the end of this year, we essentially would have an approved DCP, and we don't have. That's why we are saying that we are recommending that we accept local structure plans. We can assess that, and that can be assessed by the WIPC, and that process can get going. And then by the time we get subdivision applications, by that time, this district level DCP would be finalised, and then we can determine those ones.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Huntley.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one other question. You did talk about the stormwater, and obviously if we're going to have very, very large verges, we are going to have the issue of watering these verges. Now, I know the developers obviously look after them for 2 years before they hand them over, but these trees are not going to be mature in 2 years. And we don't really want huge areas of pavement which is just turned into sandpits, or like our Wanneroo Road at the moment is just full of mulch. So how are we going to water, and how are we going to maintain these larger verges, and is this going to be reflected on the city's costs for the water?
Mr Singh?
Thank you, Mayor. The road verges are not necessarily watered by the city. We only look at, depending upon the approval is granted through the approval process for our streetscapes and the tree planting. Generally, those areas are watered by the developers for a period of 2 to 3 years, or until the time they take the responsibility to maintain them. When it comes to the city under the PUS policy, we then reduce the water usage and make it more sustainable. The trees which get planted, they're normally watered for up to 3 summers, can depend about 3 years. After that, trees are likely to survive on their own through the seasonal rainwater.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Just on that one that Mr Singh has answered, Mayor, is it possible then for the roads that we are doing extra wide and having a larger verge on those, whilst we are doing it for bigger trees, but underneath those trees is going to be probably weeds, and I don't know what will be there because we don't look after that. Can we just ask administration to give us some sort of advice maybe next week or in the next couple of weeks on how that component's going to be looked after, because I can see an unintended consequence of really having roads that might have a tree, but the underneath of those trees are going to look a mess.
Mr Van Hannigan, do you take that on notice?
Yes, I'll take that on notice, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? There are no other questions on this item. We now go to item 4.3, consideration of amendment number 204 to District Planning Scheme number 2, following advertising, resolution of scheme anomalies affecting land in East Wanneroo Cell 3, agreed structure plan number 5. Do I have any questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Nguyen.
Just in relation to the concerns raised by the EPA, for future developments, would it go back to them for comments if that was the case?
Mr Bowring?
Thank you. So, yeah, essentially any amendments that would be put forward would go to the EPA for consultation if there was to be any change. And indeed, amendments like this will go to the EPA for their comment before initiating advertising.
Sorry, not amendments, just development.
You have another question, do you?
Yes, thank you.
And I'll give you your second question, Councillor Nguyen.
So like development applications, just I guess the concern is if those concerns may fall through the crack somehow if, for example, these are concerns that's been raised by EPA and we're saying that future applications can be dealt with under future planning applications or development applications. So if someone were to put something through, would then that automatically get referred to the EPA for consideration and comments? Is that?
Mr Bowring?
Yes, that would be the case. So there is statutory requirements for referral of certain classes of applications to the EPA where they fall within their requirements under the legislation. So that wouldn't be missed.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions on this item, we go to item 4.4, consideration of amendment number 207 to District Planning Scheme number 2 following advertising, normalisation of the Hainsworth Local Structure Plan number 98 area. Do I have any questions on that item? If there are no questions on that item, thank you, Mr Bowring and Mr Van Hannigan. We now go to assets. Thank you, Mr Singh. Mr Singh and Mr Nicholson, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. From Assets Directorate, we have 6 reports on the agenda, tonight's agenda. I'm not intending to present any of those items. We'll be happy to take council members' questions. But before we get to that one, a couple of mistakes or errors, typing errors we have in those reports. On page 2 to 5, if council members want to have a look on the comment section paragraph, the last sentences says 2044/41 and 2030/21. It should read 2031. And on page 236 is an incorrect attachment. That letter was for, letter which was meant to be in here was meant for this Whitford Avenue, Wanneroo Road, Nangara Road realignment intersection, not for East Road. And also, Councillor Herridge pointed out to us earlier, the confidential attachment has got an incorrect tender number, which all these errors will be corrected for next council meeting. And I apologize for those errors.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillors, do you have any questions on item 4.5, response to petition PTO 1823, request for speed limit reduction or installation of traffic lights at Jacaranda Drive, Wanneroo Road intersection, Wanneroo? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to item 4.5, it seems to be an increasing issue now between the overpass all the way to the Wanneroo town centre. We've had issues from Elliott Road, now all the roads in between. Main Roads has lowered the speed limit from St Rosa Road to the town centre now. Has there been any planning or traffic management precinct planning for any other issues that are going around the Wanneroo Hocking area? Because it seems to be it's really increasing the traffic, and now the next set of lights from the overpass is the town centre, and then having two lights within the town centre is now creating, also during peak hour, traffic banking up, but now it's also increasing on the other end. So is there any precinct traffic management planning that covers the whole wider area?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As far as I am aware, Main Roads actually, when they constructed this Wanneroo Road, Ocean Reef Road overpass, at that time the intention was to have a free-flowing north-south traffic. That was the main reason this project was undertaken. So there is a reluctance from Main Roads from that point of view to provide any more traffic signals between Dundebar Road and Wanneroo Road at this point in time. It could change in future depending upon. There is going to be, in future, Whiteman-Yanchep Highway, which is meant to provide a connection through to Elliott Road as well. So that may trigger further changes along Wanneroo Road at that point in time. But at this point in time, we don't understand from Main Road there is any intention to bring any changes other than the speed zoning, which they have recently introduced near San Rosa.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. So from your response and also the recommendation, so is it of administration's view that the solution to these traffic problems from now on is to reduce the speed limit down from 70 to 60? So if this was to increase past Jacaranda, and this was, say, Scenic Road residents also put in a petition, is the city's response every time going to be to lower the speed limit all the way to the overpass, or is there going to be physical upgrades that improve the connection and connectivity for these sites onto Wanneroo Road and the residential back areas?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just for point of clarification, Wanneroo Road is a state-controlled road, not controlled by the City of Wanneroo. We do have local road which connect to Wanneroo Road, which we are responsible for. Again, speed zoning is one treatment. There could be other treatment possible, but that had to be considered by Main Roads. And the way treatments are considered, you got to look at the issue first, and the way we look at it is many intersections. We look at what's happening at that intersection based on traffic data. And if it's supported by the traffic data that some kind of treatment is required to engineer out the issues out there, then we recommend that. Such as like black spots, it's kind of based on historical data, like last 5 years data informs the black spot improvements. But again, this is looking back, not looking ahead. But just going back to the Wanneroo Road question, again, we can only suggest to Main Roads, it's a state-controlled road, they make the final call on this one. The way we ask them for traffic signals for this, based on this petition request, there is no appetite from Main Roads on that. It doesn't meet the warrants of traffic signals at that particular location.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to that, is there any plans from administration to set up a roundtable with council and Main Roads stakeholders to be able to, I guess, discuss the long-term planning of Main Roads within the City of Wanneroo in terms of any upgrades and I guess any problems that all of us are having within all of our wards, to actually sit down at a roundtable and actually hear from Main Roads what their plans are, what they're planning to do, because I think that's been pretty absent in all of our wards.
Mr Singh.
Through you, Mayor, just for council members' information, administration of our traffic services team meets with main roads every month. We do discuss with them the traffic issues which we are aware of, which are brought to our attention. I think given that traffic management can be quite technical, and it's not simple solution everywhere which can fit in at any intersection or any stretch of the road. My suggestion would be in that case, if council members have the issues, we're happy to receive those issues. We can consolidate that and then discuss with main road and provide an update.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Bedworth.
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to item 4.5, I disclosed that for my employment with Main Roads. I work for Main Roads, and as a consequence, there may be perception that my impartiality on this matter may be affected. I declare that we'll consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Mr Singh, what's the administration's opinion that the current issues on Wanneroo Road are in some large part as a result of the improvement works that are ongoing on the freeway? And what's the opinion that in the future, once those are complete, that the problems down Jacaranda Drive are going to be alleviated?
Mr Singh.
Through you, Mayor, I think the freeway extension is unlikely to have any impact on this stretch of Wanneroo Road, given that freeway is already kind of about 12, 14 kilometers north of town centre. It's gone that far. The main issue which we are experiencing with the changes are the uninterrupted flow, north-south flow of traffic in this stretch of Wanneroo Road from Ocean Reef Road to Dundebar Drive. Yes, that was the intention from Main Road, to build that intersection that way to have a free-flowing north-south traffic. So we don't expect much impact of Mitchell Freeway extension, further extension on this stretch of the road.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Singh, I can understand why Main Roads are reluctant to put traffic lights in after creating two major roads meeting together and actually now having free flow traffic. However, it does leave a huge issue. I tried to turn out of Jacaranda a couple of times, and even Scenic Drive, and it is a nightmare. If that road is slowed to 60, it will actually create the traffic to bulk even further together and be less gaps, and so you'll be sitting there forever to get out. At the moment, people are taking a big risk. It is a sort of go for it opportunity if you get a gap on one side, and certainly you can't see the opposite side because of the trees. So I do think that perhaps, as Councillor Wright's put, that there should be some sort of round table, because we do need to have some sort of break, either at Scenic. If you do it at Scenic, it's at the first, but there should be at least a 60-second delay for oncoming traffic to allow the right turners to get out and create a break. And then the traffic can free flow the rest of the way. But there just needs to be a break. And it needs to either be at, if you do it at Jacaranda, your Scenic are going to get stuck as well. So ultimately, it'll bottleneck at Jacaranda. If you do it at Scenic, then you've got 3 or 4 roads ahead of you that are now actually going to have gaps produced so they can all get out on those right turns. It's a simple solution, doesn't have to be there all day long, but it could be there at peak times to have a traffic light for 60 seconds. It just holds back the traffic. And create enough gaps, or even 30 seconds. It's only to allow right turners. So it will be a simple fix for a T-junction style traffic light.
Councillor Huntley, is that a question or a statement?
So the question is, would or has Main Roads ever considered the fact of putting a traffic light at the first point of the issue?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Scenic Drive was considered a number of years ago, when I think some council members may recall we were having issues in Regent's Estate, that area. Main Roads declined that request. That wasn't accepted. And as part of the upgrade of Wanneroo Road, Ocean Reef Road intersection, we did present a report to council on the impact of that project at that time, what is likely to happen. And they did consider, I think, 11 or 12 intersections in and around that main intersection. And their view was, after the analysis done, that level of service will not deteriorate any further than it was then. That has kind of, I don't have that particular information with me, but this report does talk about the level of service of Jacaranda and Wanneroo Road intersection. It is level B. Our assessment indicates level B, which is quite acceptable level of service for the intersection. The couple of reasons for that is the traffic numbers are pretty low for Jacaranda itself. So maybe traffic is using other roads to access Wanneroo Road, but numbers are pretty low. So level B, level of service is reasonably is acceptable. So from Main Road's point of view, they did consider scenic drive. That was not kind of agreed to. And they, at this point in time, this particular intersection doesn't meet the warrants for signals.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. While the petition itself relates to vehicle access onto Wanneroo Road, one of the related issues is safe pedestrian access from people who are crossing from Pearsall-Hocking over to that side of the suburb of Wanneroo. And I know it's something that has been the subject of some complaint. Is the administration aware of how many locations for safe pedestrian crossing there are between the two suburbs? Because my understanding is Main Roads refers people under the underpass, which is, for accessibility reasons, quite a complex arrangement.
Mr Singh.
Yes, Mayor, we did receive some complaints about the pedestrian connectivity from east-west or west-east, both ways. And as a result of that one, we recently constructed a crossing point just north of Villanova Avenue. But given that, again, with the traffic numbers in Wanneroo Road, pedestrians still find it difficult to cross the road.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just going off Deputy Mayor Rowe's questions and your answer to that question, the Villanova one obviously is level with Wanneroo Road. Has the city explored any options for an overpass or an underpass?
Mr Singh.
Through you, Mayor, from my 8 years as Director of Assets, I don't think we have considered it, and I don't think Main Roads have either.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Just a quick one. Mr Singh, have you been made aware, or maybe even our plan has been made aware of a proposal to put traffic lights at Woodvale Drive and Wanneroo Road? And if that went ahead, would that actually help the chain along the line from East Road, Scenic and then Jacaranda?
Mr Singh.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not personally aware of Woodville Drive traffic signals being proposed by Main Roads. Would that have impact? I doubt, given that the distance is reasonably, like the intersection we are talking, they are at reasonable distance.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions on this item? If there are no more questions on this item, we go to item 4.6, Nangara Road upgrade from Hartman Drive to Mirrabooka Avenue, Wangara, community engagement results and land requirements. Do I have any questions on this item? If there are no questions on this item, we go to item 4.7, pedestrian access way closure between Blackmore Avenue and Innes Place, Girraween, community consultation outcomes. Do we have any questions on that item, councillors? There are no questions on that item. I go to item 4.8, tender 23150, upgrade of Hester Avenue and Connolly Drive roundabout. Please note there is a confidential attachment. If we want to discuss anything, ask questions on the confidential attachment, we will have to go into closed meeting. Are there any questions on item 4.8, councillors? Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. And the questions don't relate to the confidential attachment, and I've got two questions. It says the duration of the works is going to take 6 months. Are there any diversions proposed during the works, please?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. There will be a traffic management plan prepared for that particular intersection during the road works. The way the intersection layout is, there are likely to be some lane closures, but I don't expect the full road closure. There won't be any full road closures.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Berry.
Thank you. And my second question relates to the lighting, because it says that there won't be lighting when the works are completed. It actually says that they'll be completed post the civil works. Is it possible to put some pressure on Western Power? Because that section of Hester Avenue, the lights are frequently out. And if you've now got a new road layout and it's right by the Cambrai Raffa village, I would suggest we do need to push to make sure the lighting's also completed when the roadworks are completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We regularly follow up with Western Power for all our projects, and definitely we will do that in this case.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Figg.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is, given the freeway's been opened in the last 5 months, has the project been reassessed for its, I guess, need? Thank you.
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, the extension of freeway has triggered the need for this project. It's the other way around. The reason for that is that the traffic numbers have reduced in Hester Avenue after the freeway got extended. The need for another third lane or second lane which turns right into Conley Drive heading north, that need has diminished. We have seen that through the data that was actually causing some crashes at that intersection. Given that now traffic numbers have reduced, we don't need that extra lane, so it can go back to a dual lane roundabout only.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Do you have another question, Councillor Figg? Go ahead.
Thank you again. My other question is, and I'm not up to date with the history of this project, but is this one fully funded by the federal government's Black Spot program?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. It's funded by federal Black Spot program, full $1.5 million coming from that program.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions on this item? There are no other questions on this item. We go to item 4.9, Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program Phase 4. Do we have any questions on that item, please, councillors? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to this program, is this the last phase of funding that the city will receive, or is there any more funding rounds that we have yet to receive?
Mr Singh.
My understanding is this is the current program. Whether the federal government chooses to extend that, bring another phase, it's not known at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Are there any other questions on this item? There are no other questions on this item. I go to item 4.10, which is Tender 23025, Riverlinks Park, Clarkson, New All Abilities Playground. Please note there is a confidential attachment. Any questions on the confidential attachment on this item, we will need to go behind closed doors. Do I have any questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking on page 300, there was a comment made in there that a budget adjustment is required to meet the shortfall of the project. However, in a report that Council received in 2022, there was a commitment from administration that no municipal funds would be needed. I understand from a latest email that you circulated with councillors that obviously quotes and all that have gone up, which is not a surprise, but was there any other, did we go back to the state member to ask for an increase in that? And what was the answer from the local state member or the department?
Mr Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think, can I defer that to Acting Director, Community and Place? I think he has been in consultation with the department.
Mr Clem?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we did write to the state requesting assistance with additional funding for this project, and we did receive a response back that no, they wouldn't be in a position to provide additional funding.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Can I just go back to what Mr Clem said? So the council wrote to, I'm assuming, either the local member or the department, and we never got a response back. Is that what you're saying?
Mr Clem?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, no, we wrote to the minister, and the minister responded to us. So we did receive a response from the minister indicating that there wasn't any additional funding available for the project.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 301, it does mention the Toilet Brook and additional car park will cost an estimated $400,000, and it says we might be requested to consider this in the 24-25 budget. If we put these in retrospectively, is it going to alter or destroy any of the work that is now going ahead? Thank you.
Mr Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. No, that's not the case. The toilet block and the car park extension is just outside the playground footprint.
Any other questions on this item? If there are no more questions on this item, we now go to community place. Thank you, Mr Singh and Mr Nicholson. Welcome, Mr Clem and Mr Storts.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. There are four reports from Community and Place Directorate tonight. I'm not intending to introduce any items, but I would like to provide an update to council members on item 4.12, disbandment of the Wanneroo BMX Club Working Group, and that administration will be adding some further information into the report in advance of next week's council meeting. And essentially that information provides additional commentary to reflect the information that was previously provided in the report to council on the BMX club's lease, and that report went to council in June 2022. So some extra information will be added regarding that. That's consistent with that information that was in that report in June 2022, and it will also consider the future facility planning for East Wanneroo. There will also be a third recommendation, which will be requesting council to note the future opportunity for administration to review the re-establishment of the Wanneroo BMX Club Working Group in advance of the final option term of the lease, which is due to commence on 11th of June 2029. So that is a third recommendation that is being intended to added to the report for next week. Other than that, I'm happy to take, and Mr Starwatt's happy to take any questions on the reports tonight.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Did you have a declaration, Councillor? Oh, sorry. So we'll go to item 4.11, Grandis Park Skate Park Lighting Investigation Outcomes. Do we have any questions on that item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to this item, I remember when it was originally presented to council, it was actually the local kids that used that facility. And I note that we received a 4% response rate, and we're basing a recommendation on a 4% rate. Considering that we already have a lack of facilities for young people, especially in Banksia Grove, is it wise to not support? Oh, that's probably not a good question to ask, but have we tried any other methods for community consultation, as, for example, engaging with the local schools to pick up more responses from young people that use that site and actually getting a better idea?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. So the community engagement was conducted in accordance with our community engagement policy, and there were 220 letters sent out to local residents and homeowners. The consultation period was advertised on our Your Say website, and there was some promotion through our social media channels. So the consultation did follow our normal processes for consultations on a matter of this nature.
Mr Clem, I've got a question here. I know we have a policy for our consultation, but does our consultation include access to the youth or to the local youth centres to see what they would like, because the skate park is actually for them? I know the local community around there would get letters to their houses because the skate park would affect the people living by there. But have we actually tried to access the youth who don't necessarily get the letters, who don't necessarily go on Facebook, and who are more likely to have other avenues of communication, and they would be the ones that would be using it? I'm mindful of this because I do understand the situation which we have with youth behaviour in the area and the lack of facilities for them. Have we been able to access the youth adequately, or is the age of the people who've responded to the consultation mostly been not youth?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't believe we have the statistics on the demographics of the people who responded to the consultation. However, and to answer the first part of your question, the community engagement policy, to my knowledge, does not specifically indicate methods of engagement based on different demographics, although Mr Starwarts might be able to answer that question better than me. So, in this case, we followed the community engagement policy for a project of this nature. And what we engaged on was in regards to, I guess, additional amenities for the existing skate park. So the skate park obviously is in situ and in place and is well used, and the consultation was around floodlights to enable, I guess, participation in that skate park after hours or after dark.
Just one other question. The petition, was that put in by the youth, mostly the youth, or was it put in by surrounding residents? Do you have an idea of the demographic of how that position, because the petition, I don't think when I read it, I don't think there was a mention of details of the petition in the report, and I thought that was a shortfall because I would like to see the petition in context with the report knocking back the lighting. Can you respond to that, please, Mr Clem?
Yes, certainly we can include more information on the nature of the petition and the number of responses, etc., in the report for next week. It is our understanding that the lead petitioner was a young gentleman, and presumably he did access his friends in getting signatures on the petition.
Furthermore to that, the young gentleman who put the petition together and submitted it, has he been advised that this item has come to council this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we have tried to contact him by phone, and we've sent him written communication as per the normal protocol with petitions, advising him that the matter would be coming to council tonight.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Bedworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I note, in following on from Councillor Wright's comments, that of 9 respondents, only 4 of these were actually not supportive of the lighting. And in some of the comments, it would appear that there's a perception that antisocial behaviour, crime, would be encouraged. Have we actually approached local police to get any fact-based evidence to support that concern, or are we just looking at the comments made?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. No, we haven't liaised with local police on this particular project. We would discuss these kinds of matters through our community development team, who run all sorts of programs for youth. And we haven't had any issues raised to them, I guess, about the consultation that we've undertaken.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Meyer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was a bit amazed, Mayor, as you are, about the consultation. One of the issues on page 302, Mr Clem, you do indicate that this report is initiated by the petition that was tabled at the November 21 meeting, but you don't refer to anything in the report on how many petitioners were in that petition. So for all I know, there could have been, just 50 or 100 or 200. They should have all been asked to make some sort of submission. Was that done at all, or did you only contact the local houses?
Mr Clem.
No, we wouldn't have contacted each of the individual signatories to the petition. It would have been the engagement that we conducted in accordance with the policy, by writing to each of the households in that particular radius or that local area.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions, Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you. There is a couple of other parts to the report, but I think what I'll do here, Mayor, is I'll foreshadow an amendment for next week, and then I'll speak to Mr Clem afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Any other questions? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I do note in the report that it does say that at the moment the sports field has floodlighting and 50 lux, and that the recommendation is to go to 100 lux. But we are talking about just the skate park. So does this reflect, if we're talking about lighting, that we're actually going to light the whole park to 100 lux? because that really is not going to solve this problem at all. We can leave the grounds at 50 lux, but what I'm just thinking of is, if we actually were looking to the future and thinking about smart cities and smart lighting, we could actually use pinpoint lighting in the skate park, LEDs pinpoints, which will then stay out of neighbours' gardens, but also that they switch off when no one's utilising the skate park. So they switch on when someone walks by and off within a minute.
Councillor Huntley, is this a question?
So my question is, have we considered pinpoint lighting and smart lighting to go in here rather than just say no to 100 lux?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Whenever we install floodlighting within our sports facilities, we do install smart switching mechanisms in conjunction with that. At the moment, it's based on a text message system. So, for example, sporting clubs, when they turn up at a sports ground, rather than the lights just being on, they will text message the lights through a SIM card within the lighting control box, and that turns the lights on, and then they text when they leave to turn them off. And we set the parameters around the timings, the minimum and maximum times that those lights can be on. So whilst that wouldn't necessarily work in a skate park, because a skate park is not a booked facility, something like push-button lighting, so if someone is there, then they can push a button which would activate the lights. That's something that's common for the use of public free tennis courts. So those smart switching mechanisms are something that the city does use.
Could they be used here? Sorry, Madam Mayor.
You have another question, and Mr Clem, you can respond to
Yes, if floodlighting was supported and constructed, then we would look at smart switching mechanisms to take advantage of those kinds of possibilities.
Thank you, Mr Clem. I've just been told by the acting CEO that there were 48 petitioners in that petition, for your information. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to the point of smart switches, usually I'm 100% not opposed to any of those sorts of things, but for a skate park though, if the light was to go off while someone is riding a skateboard or a push button, that could cause some safety concerns, so I just want to flag that.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Heritage.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. I was wondering if we can have in our briefing notes for next week the funds that we've expended so far on the project.
Thank you, Councillor Hetheridge. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Having a lot of thoughts about, I guess, the engagement policy as a result of what we've seen in how, I guess, the response and what it seems to be with the youth. So I don't know if this is appropriate in terms of a broader question, but I appreciate and thank you for following the policy that we do have for consultation. My question is, do you feel the current engagement policy is sufficient or too restrictive and maybe in need of review?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. All our policies go through periodic review processes, so if new, I guess, information or approaches are flagged or are considered, then that is something that Council can take into account when those reviews of policies are presented to Council.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on this item? If there are no more questions on this item, I'll go to item 4.12, disbandment of the Wanneroo BMX Working Group. Do I have any questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
I hate to be that person tonight. Just in regards to this item and from the update that Mr Clem has proposed for the OCM, I'd just like to foreshadow a alternative
An amendment?
Amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any other questions on 4.12? Councillor Nguyen.
Sorry, earlier you mentioned a date 2029. What's the date for? Why did you align it to that date?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. That date is the current end term of the current lease. There is a 5-year option of renewal at that point in time in 2029, so potentially an additional 5 years on top of 2029 for the leased period.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on 4.12? There are no questions on 4.12. We now go to 4.13, Review of the CATS Local Law 2023. Do we have any questions on this item? Deputy Mayor Rowe, I'm going there first.
Thanks, Mayor. I have 3 questions that I'll ask individually with your indulgence. The first is, at our last meeting, one of the requests of administration was to table this item for discussion at the Walga North Metro Zone, particularly because we were talking about the need to advocate to the state government to review the CAT Act. Does administration have an update as to whether that item was tabled for discussion and if an action item was provided to the State Council?
Mr Clem?
Thank you, Mayor. I can confirm, yes, that Walga did send a letter to the relevant minister in February this year to advocate for strengthening of the CAT Act, which is up for renewal next year following the issue being raised by local governments. A response was received from the Minister quite recently and highlighted that the CAT Act review will be commencing in 2024, and this will be the opportunity to address those issues.
Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. The second question is, as part of our consultation and the feedback from councillors throughout this process, we were talking around the limitations in the powers of rangers to either trap or detain nuisance cats. Is the city updating its resources in line once this gazettal process occurs, just so those resources are available to pet owners and the wider public?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the city has a couple of brochures, the nuisance cats brochure and the cats and wildlife brochure. Those documents will be updated following the local law being adopted, and that will include information on the role of city rangers, and both documents will be available via the website or in hard copy.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Deputy Mayor Rowe, one more.
Yes, one last question. The other issue that came out through our broader conversations was to do with spaying, neutering and registering cats, because we were talking that it's not just about restriction of where cats can go and potentially damaging environmental spaces, but around the proliferation of cats in neighbourhood areas. Does administration have an update around if we are collaborating with partner organisations such as Cat Haven, because that was a request and a piece of feedback that came through our last meetings on this matter?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this matter was discussed at a recent meeting with council members when we talked about the motion that had been brought to council previously on waiver of cat and dog registration fees for pensioners. And as an outcome of those discussions, administration will undertake some investigations and bring a paper back to council in the new year outlining a range of possibilities to increase registration numbers and spaying and neutering, as well as collaborating with other stakeholders and agencies to help promote a more approach to responsible pet ownership.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 2 questions. The first question is on page 327 and it's cat not to be a nuisance, where in the opinion of an authorised person a cat is creating a nuisance. Who's going to be deemed as an authorised person, please? That's my first question.
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. The rangers are authorised people under the CAT Act.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Berry, your second question.
Thank you. And my second question relates to the page 329, Schedule 1 of the cat prohibited areas. That's a lot of areas for rangers to patrol. So what happens if cats are found in those areas, and will the owners be automatically fined if cats are in those areas, or will they just get warnings, or how are we going to cover the extra cost to patrol, well, several areas? Thank you.
Mr Clem. Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, it will be done on a complaint basis. So the rangers will not be patrolling all of those additional areas, but if they get the complaints, having this in the local law allows them to act upon it. And in accordance with our enforcement regime throughout the city, the first port of call will be education, and we will work to educate cat owners. It is of interest, though, that generally when we have cats that are found in these areas such as these, more often than not, we can't locate those owners.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can we also include chipping? Because obviously we are talking about identifying cats. So cats will need to be chipped to be able to identify them, because normally if they're wearing a collar they can lose it, and so it's very, very difficult to actually determine whose cat it is, obviously. But the other thing is, do the rangers actually trap cats, or have we taken traps away?
Ms Thrush.
Chipping is covered through the Cat Act, so as part of our registration, we need them to be chipped. So that's the first question. The second question, in terms of trapping, rangers are able to trap cats on residential properties. There are a number of criteria that have to be met because we have to do so humanely. And so we encourage people who've got nuisance cats to contact the city, and we can work with them to see if trapping is an appropriate measure to use.
Thank you. Councillor Huntley.
Yeah, just like to clear up something about the chipping. I was actually referring to looking at a way of perhaps providing a free chipping day, so either once a year or biannually, to make sure that we get these cats chipped and to obviously give us a better range to get them under the guidance of being on the register.
Ms Thrush. Yep. Mr Clem.
I'll take that one, Mayor. Yes, the intent of doing some investigations and bringing some information back to Council for discussion would include incentives around microchipping and other things as well.
And the Acting CEO would like to add to that.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder too that we did talk about a new exercise like that being incorporated in our budget discussions for next year. So that's part of what the investigation will be doing, bring that forward to us when we get to the operational budget.
Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Thank you. I have to ask some questions. So a cat is not allowed to be in a cat prohibited area. If it is, it's deemed to be a nuisance. Is that correct?
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, they are two separate provisions. So we have one provision around nuisance cats, and cats are not to be nuisances. We have a second provision around prohibited areas, which is the listed conservation areas that cats are prohibited within.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. So under 3.23, it says, when a nuisance has occurred, a notice to abate the nuisance is given. I'm assuming that's to the owner and not the cat. And the notice remains in force for a specific period of time, but can't exceed 28 days. So the ranger needs to find that cat, find the owner, then give the notice to the owner for a 28-day notice to keep their cat in. Is that essentially what you're saying there?
Ms Thrush.
So once again, this is around the nuisance provisions. This isn't around the prohibition provisions. So if a cat is deemed to be a nuisance, it means that we have identified the owner of that cat and we have served on the cat owner an abatement notice. So, for example, cat A is going into their neighbour's property and defecating in their gardens, and it's a nuisance. So, therefore, we've identified the owner of the cat. We've served them a notice to abate, to keep their cat We can't tell them to keep their cat on their property because that is not in accordance with the Cat Act. We have to tell them that their cat cannot be a nuisance by going onto another person's property. And it can't do so for 28 days. That's how it's written under the Act.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm going to let Councillor Berry have a turn now. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify. So you said that if the cats are picked up in any of those areas that are forbidden areas, normally the cats are not chipped or haven't got a collar. So I'm going to assume they're stray or feral. What do you do with the cats? Thank you.
Ms Thrush.
It will be as we do at the moment. So if we pick up any cats who we cannot identify the owner, whether that's because they're stray, they're feral, or they're what we call unowned cats, so those cats that wander around and fed by everybody, at that stage we impound them and then we transport them to Cat Haven, who then will try to rehome those cats where appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions on, yes, Councillor Miles?
Yeah, just to, I guess, just to finalise my questions on cats. I don't own a cat, never had a cat. But with all of the restricted areas, and they are in important locations, they are in our environmental areas, and I think most councillors understand that they need to be dealt with in those areas. Does Ranger Services, are they going to have a plan to maybe do some spot traps in these locations to try and mitigate the strays, the wildcats and the like, to be able to deal with them there? Is that a plan that you are working up as part of what the acting CEO said for next year's budget, or have you already got something in place?
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, our Parks and Conservation team has an existing trapping program for feral animals that it already conducts. The Rangers team is not suggesting that we do anything in addition to that at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
So just in light of what you were just saying, the conservation team, are they authorised to do the trapping of cats under the Cat Act then? Because you said before, rangers are authorised person to capture and fine for cats. Are the people in conservation authorised to do same?
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, no, they're not authorised. If they do happen to trap a cat within those areas that is a registered microchipped cat that we can identify the owner of, they can contact a ranger who can then take the appropriate measures.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Bedworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious around clause 2.3, standard number of cats. It says no more than 3 cats may be kept on premises at which a member of a cat organisation is not orderly resident. Forgive me, I've not read the regulations yet, but can you talk me through why it's necessary to be a member of a cat organisation and live at a premises? Is that for people who perhaps work at Cat Haven and bring them home, or?
Ms Thrush.
I'm not sure of the technicalities of that. I'll take that question on notice.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Nguyen.
Just the penalty unit, is it $10 a unit?
Ms Thrush or Mr Clem?
Through you, Mayor, our standard penalty units are $10 per unit.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Nguyen.
So is the practice, if you can't identify a cat, therefore you can't find the cat owner, what do you do then with the cat?
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, as answered previously, if we cannot identify the cat owner, we will impound the cat. Once the cat's impounded, it will then be transported to Cat Haven, who will attempt to rehome the cat.
Thank you. Any other questions? If there are no other questions on that, we're actually going on to item 4.14, which is dog exercise provision lot 124 timely hostess Muse. Marigin up. So we're doing dogs and cats tonight. Do I have any question on 4.14? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is actually a follow-on from the large animal or the dog exercise, the horse exercise park that we have out there in Maridgina. At the time that we were dealing with it, there was a bit of discussion on whether to ban dogs or have dogs on leash, and I guess that's the extent of this report here tonight for council. I'm just trying to get to the report. My only question to administration is, whilst I understand some people out in Maridgina, they have horses, they also have dogs, so their dogs are familiar with horses. So they would rather have dogs on leads rather than the banning of a dog. Has administration looked at that possibility?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. So Councillor Miles is right. This goes back to the designating of Lot 124 Timely Hostess Mews as a horse approved area. And in that consultation we did on that matter, we did receive some communication back from respondents that there were some concerns regarding conflict between horses and dogs that are exercised off lead. So when that was all brought back to council, the resolution from council was to request that the CEO give local public notice stating that the City of Wanneroo proposes to make a specification in accordance with the Dog Act, a summary of its purpose to the effect of prohibiting dogs being on Lot 124 Timely Hostess Mews. So administration then undertook the appropriate public notice on that particular matter, and we received no responses to that public notice. Hence, the recommendation tonight is to continue with determining that Timely Hostess Mews be a place where dogs are prohibited at all times.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I totally understand, Mr Clem, where we came from and where we're going to. What's been brought up to me recently by some of the dog owners, some of the horse owners, they are dog owners as well, is quite often when they use the bridle trails, they do take their dogs with them because they find that their dogs do chase off other animals that might scare their horses when they're riding along. So I said to them, well, you know, if we make it a horse-only area, you won't be able to bring your dogs to that site. That they sort of got it, but then they said, well, can't we have them on a lead? Because some people do have long leads. And reading in your report on page 347, you say in the report you can do a C where it says rural leashing area under subsection 3B. Is that can we actually do that as opposed to just banning dogs? Because you also get the same scenario where nearby residents have been used to throwing a ball for their dogs in the late evening when you don't normally be there with your horse anyway.
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, to answer the question, yes, council could make a different determination. I would think, though, in this case, another public notice would need to be undertaken specifying that it is proposed to allocate Lot 124 Timely Hostess Mews as a dog on leash area. So we would have to undertake a separate public notice period. So the recommendation could be changed to direct administration to do that.
Well, I'm happy to foreshadow that amendment. But before, just to ask a further question, because I know last time we were discussing this in chamber, and I think Ms Thrush sort of indicated it was going to be too hard to police, that if you could have it as a horse area, which it is now, but if there's no horses on the property, you could then have a dog. And I think that was too hard to write the regulation to make happen. So you either have none at all or on leashes. I have spoken to some of the residents out there. They're happy with the leads, have them on leashes, because they believe that they can tie the dog up or whatever and then go back down the bridle trails. But if we say none at all, they can't even tie them up in the corner because it's a no dog zone. So that's where there's a bit of, again, unintended consequence. So I'm happy to foreshadow the amendment for next week for council to change, and then maybe another term of advertising, however long that is, I don't know.
Councillor Miles, to change it from what we're moving here, that would be an alternative, not an amendment, and it would have to go back to council, to forum, to rediscuss if that was put up. Councillor Huntley, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, Madam Mayor. I do notice we're actually, everybody is having to consider this, and not very many people have actually seen this area or actually know it. It's a very unique area, just tucked away and hidden, and the local residents have been using it for years. They walk their dogs, they move their horses, but it's never been. It's always been owned. They've never thought that it was council property and that it could be something until Councillor Miles brought it up, that perhaps it should be recognised as a horse exercise area due to the fact they did ask for some water and some shelter. But since that has occurred...
Councillor Huntley, could you please ask the question?
Yeah, since that's occurred, there have now been issues with the fact that people do take their dogs there. Now it's a horse park. We're going to have other people coming in. This is what's upsetting the residents because they didn't...
What is the question, Councillor Huntley?
So the question is, we have never seen an overhead view of the park and how big it actually is. So can we provide some photographs for the councillors to actually look at, and so they can actually see how big this place is, and that in fact there is actually a conservation area which could easily be converted into a dog park and will need to be fenced at some point from horses coming in. So really, I know Councillor Miles wants to foreshadow the leads, but if we're going that far, maybe we should foreshadow the actual... The photo that we've got is
what's the
not
question,
consistent.
Councillor Huntley? The question.
The question is, can we force... I'll speak to Councillor Miles. Perhaps we should foreshadow the fact that we turn
that's not
the
a question.
conservation park into a dog area rather than a leash.
Okay, so that's not a question, that's a statement.
Well, the question is, can we have some photographs?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we can include some photographs and an aerial and some on-ground photographs for next week's report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. Just two quick questions for the purpose of the record. Can we ask the administration if the local public notice was issued advising that dog exercise would be prohibited on site, and if also no submissions were received?
Mr Clem.
That's correct. The notice was issued on the basis of Council's resolution, and we received no submissions on that notice.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Deputy Mayor Rowe, did you have another question? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Question, does administration know of any other councils who have any experience of a like situation with horses and dogs? Thank you.
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we are aware of Wanneroo Point, City of Dundebar, who has had a lot of conflict between horse and dogs in their area and had to close it because of such conflict.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Follow up. Can we clarify if the conflict was if the dogs were on leash or off leash?
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, I believe it was off leash, but I can confirm that.
Thank you. Councillor Parker, did you have a question?
Yes, I actually have two. Mr. Clem, can you please remind us how many people actually requested a horse-only area? And the second question was, how many horse-only areas are there in the city of Wanneroo?
Thank you. Mr. Clem.
I might ask Ms Thrush to answer the first question. My understanding, this is the only horse exercise area, public horse exercise area in the city.
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, this request came through via a motion on notice from the late Councillor Baker. Thank you. How embarrassing. So it was a request from Councillor Baker, not a request from the public. It then went out to consultation, of which we had feedback saying that it was a good idea.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question in regards to our statutory timeframes for notices. How much do they actually cost the city?
Ms Thrush.
We'd have to take that on notice and check with governance. I'm not sure of the cost to the city.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions on this item, we go to corporate strategy and performance. Thank you, Mr. Clem and Ms Thrush, and Mr. Stewarts. Thank you, Ms Smart.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors. There are 5 reports from the Corporate Strategy and Performance Directorate tonight. I'm not proposing to present on those 5 items, but I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions on item 4.15, the 2022-23 Q4 Corporate Performance Report? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. You'll like my question, I promise. This corporate performance report is for the last quarter, for the last budget. So the new one will reflect council's new priorities, including the Wanneroo Recreation Centre. So we'll get a better update from now on quarterly, or is that for another 2 reports to come?
Ms Smart.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Wright. You will receive a Q1 report shortly. We are due for that for the new corporate business plan. 10 of the KPIs that are in this 4th quarter are new, and there will be updates provided in the future reports.
Thank you. Councillor Herridge.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm not used to being on this side of the room. It's actually quite weird. This is probably a 2-part question. It would be remiss of me to not hit up the Alexander Drive shared pathway that's in Lansdale again, which is one of a number that has been delayed by Western Power. We have advocated and asked considerably, I know we've done it by letter, what else can we do? And is there, because the length of it is actually so large as well, the footpath, can we start it at some point? Is it all impacted by Western Power?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. The short answer is yes, it is impacted by Western Power. We did look at breaking it down. That's not going to be a feasible exercise. So we just are waiting for Western Power to at least give us a design. Then we can consider which sections we can actually do, if we can do.
Any other questions, councillors, on that item? Okay, any questions on 4.1? Oh, sorry. Oh, Councillor Nguyen.
Sorry, just on page 367, that's the capital projects, in particular the Lansdale Library, where we've got the annual budget and we've only spent about 63%. I know the next stage of it is we're going out to tender, but that first stage, is that the budget for the design?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This library project is funded over multiple years. So this was a budget for 22-23, and the design was undertaken, started that year, and the community engagement happened. At this point in time, there is more funding allocated in this financial year, and there's further last lot of funding in next financial year is listed to be allocated. We are currently out for tender, and the tenders will be closing, I think, about 2 and 3 weeks' time.
Yes. So
Thank you, Mr Singh. Do you have another question, Councillor Nguyen?
I do. So what's left on the budget? What's that needed to be spent on? Because you've got about 63% that's spent, and then there's, I guess, the rest, 37%.
Mr Singh?
Thank you, Mayor. The earlier part of the funding is for the design and project development. Once that's complete, then we'll go into construction. Any unspent funds from the design phase go into construction phase.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Nguyen, this is about the finance reports. Yes. Capital projects should be asked to Mr Singh at another time, or you could write an email about that. Is this about the capital items, or is it about the finance?
It's a capital item.
Well, can you send an email about this to Mr Singh? Thank you. Any other questions about the Q4 corporate performance report, please, councillors? Okay, I move on to item 4.16, the warrant of payments to the period 30th of September 2023. Do I have any questions on the warrant of payments? Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. It's only one question. It's on page 419, and it's back to cats, I'm afraid. It's impound charges, community safety, paid to, obviously, Cat Welfare Society, otherwise known as Cat Haven. How many cats are covered by the $7,804.50 that we were charged? I appreciate you'll probably need to take that on notice. Thank you.
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we'll take that one on notice.
Any other questions on the warrant of payments? If there are no more questions on the warrant of payments, we go to item 4.17, the financial activity statement for the period ended the 30th of September 2023. Do I have any questions on that item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at the recommendation for the item report was one of the projects, Hinkley Park, being the toilet block and CCTV. I'm just querying in regards to the timing of this, because this time frame was actually given out to residents, being the project was to start in March 2023 and finish around June 2023. That was my latest update, and I haven't received any update since that. Was there any reason why this item wasn't brought to council earlier in terms of us requesting council for additional funding, and why it's taken so long to come to this point?
Mr Singh.
Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice and include the response in the briefing notes.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions? Then, Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably another question on notice. It's page 466. It relates to interest earnings and the fact that obviously we've got a favourable variance. Interest rates are going up. Is it possible to advise us what we think that will be by the end of the financial year in terms of what gain or favourable variance you'll think you'll have by 30 June, please? Thank you.
Ms Hart?
Yes, thank you for the question. We'll take that on notice. Thank you.
Any other questions on 4.17? The acting CEO said that that was already in there, Councillor Berry.
So through the Mayor, are you asking Councillor Berry about the budget for the year and the estimate for the year?
Yes, I was. Thank you.
So if you look on page 465, you'll find the revised budget year to date and the annual as well. So we'll go and check whether there's any updates to those, but otherwise that's what we're working through. But we'll see whether there's an estimate that's taking it further.
Thank you. So at the moment, we've got 1.4 million extra from interest. It was just what we think we're going to have by the end of the year, extra in interest. Thank you.
Okay, item 4.18, change of valuation of land method, 78 Golf View Place, Nangara. Do I have any questions on that item? Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to get an understanding on, because there's a lot of people that have, and I preface this by saying there's a lot of people in and around the rural areas that do not grow anything. They can't, they've got no water in the site. Do they each individually need to come to council and have a GRV value put on their land, or is administration going to start looking at them more blanketly going forward?
Ms Smart.
Yes, thank you for the question. I may need to do some more research and come back to you on that, councillor. But this particular submission has come through to clarify that the property is now residential only. So there may be elements of rural still on the properties that you're referring to as well, even though they may be not conducting those circumstances. But I will investigate and come back further to you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, you have another question?
Yeah, thank you. Because I'd just like to understand what the difference would be, and if administration can provide this also during the week. If somebody has ceased operating at all and they have no sort of, I guess, area that they are using for rural, and they are only living on the property, should they then now start seeking a GRV valuation as opposed to a UV valuation?
Ms Smart.
Yes, thank you, councillor. I'll get some more information and provide that for you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on that item? Councillor Nguyen.
Yes, so what happens when they start reusing the area as rural or some other commercial? Do they need to notify the council if there's a change of use?
Ms Smart.
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure about the provisions of requirement to notify the council, so I'll provide that information to you. What I can confirm is that it's ultimately the minister's decision, so we do need to go through a process once any submission has been made.
The acting CEO can respond to that question.
Thank you, Mayor. So in the case of UV to GRV, that's one thing, but you've actually asked about whether they become commercial. So there's no requirement for them to say that to tell us that they're commercial. However, we watch for any activity that looks like to be majority commercial on a property. So we do eventually check a lot of the areas for that kind of activity, but that's still a GRV then, a GRV rated, but it becomes a different land use.
Thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Sorry, do we have mechanism to apply a different rate retrospectively if through investigation we found out that a particular property has recommenced use as rural or some other activity rather than residential?
Acting CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. We generally wouldn't do that. We'd do it from the time we'd find out. But as I say, you might be asking a different question from what this report's about, which is going from a unimproved value to gross rental value. But certainly for commercial, once it's under GRV, we would, once we find out, then start applying the rates.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions on this item, we go to item 4.19, Personal Information Privacy Policy Scheduled Review. Any questions on this item? If there are no questions on this item, we have the Chief Executive Office and there are no items there. We have item 5, motions on notice. Councillor Berry has a consideration of council members at events. Then item 6 to be tabled at the briefing. There is nothing. Item 7, public question time. There's no public in the gallery. Item 8, confidential. There is no confidential. Item 9, date of the next meeting. The next ordinary council meeting has been scheduled for 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 21st of November 2023, to be held at Council Chambers, Civic Centre, 23 Dundebar Road, Wanneroo. And item 10 is closure of the meeting dead on 8 p.m. Thank you, councillors.